So today we're talking about C# and ASP.NET. C# is a programming language. One of many, as you know, exists in the C family of languages, which is, Java and C++, C#, and so ASP.NET is a framework from Microsoft. So C# is a proprietary language from Microsoft. ASP.NET is a proprietary framework from Microsoft that allows the C# language to interact with a very, very powerful series of everything from data management tools to web design to application design. These programs and these abilities to create applications at the cloud level, at the third tier level. So basically have the ability using ASP.NET, using a software called Visual Studio to create applications in C# as the language. We have the ability to create applications once and have them run at a global level to 11 billion users at one time. We also have the ability to roll them out to mobile applications, tablet applications, and PCs, and any device can use these applications without ever really changing them. So it's a very, very powerful platform, a very powerful language, and a very powerful kind of concept to understand. And that's the way a lot of companies want to build technology today, have those attributes. All right, so I'll go through a quick kind of just intro to how we're going to work this today, and then we'll get into the demo portion of it. So this is coming to you from the ETIC. The ETIC is in the Long Island campus currently in room 107, but it is also in our New York City campus now on the 6th floor in room 607, 608. You can visit us at nyit.edu/ETIC. All the prototyping abilities that you would need there to build new technologies, plus programs like iNTEREST and Ursula and other things to give you experience. So we are there when you are ready to gain experience. So it's about a topic today, a little bit of background. Just kind of went over what C# was and what ASP.NET was. We're going to try to give you, an awareness of the existing technologies to demonstrate different career pathways for those technologies, and then to demonstrate the components of those technologies and the functionalities of those technologies. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about different things that are available to you as far as career opportunities, talk to you a little bit about the language, and then we're going to go over all these different physical components, creating projects, creating code, launching it and loading it and updating it to a web server, and actually accessing that application from the internet. So you'll be able to see all that and gain all that experience from this lecture. Even as short as it is, we're going to try to cover all that for you. So just an idea of just a quick Indeed search for a C# developer in the region. This is over in Boston, but very, very lucrative salaries, very lucrative. Those are starting salaries. So by the time you become a manager of other developers, a senior developer is a single person who can program within 3 to 5 years of experience, and you've built a few applications. But once you start managing other developers, it becomes extremely lucrative, where you can run a team of people to develop applications. It is proprietary, which turns a lot of startup companies off to it because they want to sell the company with the technology. But organizations that do a lot of internal programming use it almost exclusively in a lot of ways. So it's a very, very popular language and framework for that. Okay. Background to the language. Again, there's a C family of languages. And you'll see things like JavaScript and Java and C++ and things like that. Those are the C family of languages. When you talk about top 10 languages that are available today, C# isn't that high on the list, but it is one of the popular languages. And the reason is that there's tons of applications and jobs that are created in local organizations that they want to build a new piece of software for their clients. They want to build a new piece of software for internal use for accounting or finance or whatever it might be. Many times that's built with these types of technologies. There's also a bunch of that are out there that are running their forward-facing platforms from this, a lot of media companies and things like that. So you have a really wide range of choices of what type of companies to work for, because at some level or another, everybody is using it for something. Okay. So for different tiers of applications, we have 1 tier, 2 tier, and 3 tier applications. Just remember, if we build a single tier application, the database, and the coding itself is all running on one machine. It could be a phone app. It could be something local, like a local computer program that attaches to like a printer or something like that. Printer configuration software. That's tier 1 or 1 tier applications. Tier 2 applications or 2 tier applications when you have the program running on a machine and attaching to a database remotely on your local network, your local intranet network. It's called client server. But 3 tier applications, basically where every layer runs on one platform. Now it could be a single server, but it's usually like a server farm because it wants to allow hundreds of thousands of users at one time. but essentially it's cloud-based and it's running on these servers in the cloud. So once you update an application in any way on that main system, you make one edit one time and you publish it. There's something called publishing we're going to talk about today. That change in that edit is available to literally the globe at once. It's a really cool concept because you're not building an application, fixing it, enhancing it, patching it, and then updating everybody, saying you have 100 clients and you update them one time. You're in the 3-tier application, you're making those changes on the database itself, on the application itself, on the actual interfaces itself, whatever it might be. Once you make them and you publish them, they're published to all your users at once. Maybe they have to refresh their browser or something like that, but that's it. There's no updates, there's no patches, and it's really an incredibly powerful tool and platform. And that's really what everyone's looking for today. They don't want to get caught up in, I've got 3 different versions of software and we're going to do updates to clients and things like that. They want to run it at this 3-tier level. That's what we're learning today. We're talking about the ASP.NET framework. We're talking about the C# language. We're talking about IIS is the web server we're going to use. But really, we're talking about building applications in the cloud. So once we build them and release them and edit them, they're available for us, for everybody at once. And that's just another kind of explanation of 3-tier system. Today, we're going to talk about creating the projects. We're talking about ASP.NET, the framework, and what that means. It's about C#, the language, a programming language, and different looks and feels of the language, so you can be familiar with it. Creating web forms, creating the code behind those forms. We're going to talk about configuring your web server and what it means to have a web server. And then publishing your project to that web server so that it's available for the project, and of course, accessing and running the project. So what we're going to do, just understand that as we create these projects and programs, we are creating them in the cloud. We're creating them on servers running. We're testing them on our local machines in an environment we're using an IDE called Visual Studio. Visual Studio is the #1 IDE in use today. It's Microsoft's Visual IDE. You may have heard of Eclipse and NetBeans. Those are IDEs for Java. We have PyCharm, which is an IDE for Python. Visual Studio is an IDE by Microsoft, but one project can include applications from all different sorts of languages and things like that. You can include pretty much anything from anywhere into one project in Visual Studio. So it's really got the #1 market share as far as IDEs in use today. The Visual Studio IDE, C#, ASP.NET, SQL Server is the server you can use as a database server. But just keep in mind, these are all free. There are paid for enterprise levels that Microsoft pays for like companies that develop, but for you, they're free. So the only thing holding you back from learning these technologies that we do go over in the interest program is really your motivation in learning things that are new, right? There's no fees here. There's tons of YouTube videos and sessions like this and interest that we do for you. So keep that in mind, that benefit from a lot of these free versions that are out there because they're not holding you back from anything. Microsoft did it in a really cool way where they created these downloads that you can install and they run nearly exact to the full enterprise version. So once you go into the workforce, you've got all the experience in the world for your from the work you've been doing. So now we're going to get into the demonstration portion of C# and developing ASP.NET applications. This piece of software, don't be mystified by Visual Studio. It's a piece of software just like any other software you have, iTunes or whatever it might be. Basically, when you click the start button, you'll have a Visual Studio icon to start it up. I have a older version, 2017, but they have 2019, I believe, is the version they have. And there's all kinds of things that differ between these versions, enhancements they have. But essentially everything, remains very much the same format-wise. So what you'll see is in Visual Studio, you'll see the opportunity to kind of click file and have all the different options for saving your products, just like any other program, editing different things in your project. And of course, you have a view component to see all the tools you might be able to use in project drop downs. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to create a new project, and that project is going to be a web-based project, a web app, and we're going to choose C# as the language. So we're going to click on File, we're going to click on New, we're going to click on Project, and then when the projects come up, notice what you can do with Visual Studio. You can create mobile apps for Android or for iPhones. You can create console apps, which are just kind of console-based apps that will run behind the scenes. You can create Windows Forms apps that run like local program running on your computer. All kinds of different things that you can create with Visual Studio. We're going to choose for this one, we're going to create the ASP.NET web app application, the .NET framework application. We're going to make sure we choose whatever version of .NET that we want. If you're building an application for an older computer that may not have a new version of .NET on it, you can choose the particular version of the framework you use. And in this case, we're going to build something called a demo. We'll call it demo underscore interest. Okay. And that'll be our project name, demo underscore interest. And then when we choose that project, it's going to ask us what type of web application we want to create. We can create a web forms app, which we're going to do, which is the most common, where one web form calls another and so forth. There's something called model view controller, which is neat, but it's more advanced, where we work with models and then those models become the application. You can build a web API or application programming interface to make applications talk to your web server, or you can create single application pages for HTML5 and different technologies like that. Okay, so we're going to create a web forms app, and we are going to let that load. And once that loads up, Microsoft is now creating this web application for us. So it incorporates all the different components that we need to launch it to the website for us. So we don't have to go through and figure a lot of that out. So basically, it created this project called demo underscore interest, and we have this web application one piece here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at these different files in here and how they work and how they load, and what role they play in this project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you a little bit to a web server, so you understand what we're doing here in Visual Studio and C#. I'm going to introduce it to you so that you understand what we're doing with what we create in C#, and then how it's actually going to be seen millions of users if we wanted it to. So what we do is, whenever we have a web server, in this case, the same application, same program we're using to run Visual Studio, the same server, the same device or machine, we're also using as the web server. So what you'll see is that whenever you choose a machine to host data that you're going to allow out to the world to see, basically what you'll see is that there's folders, just like any other computer, on there, a Linux computer or PC or a Windows server in this case, on the actual C drive. What we see is a program called inetpub. And in inetpub, there's a www root folder. Now, inetpub is the folder that IIS, Internet Information Systems, Internet Information Server for Microsoft, uses. Once it's installed and it's configured as a web server on Microsoft, which, by the way, also free. Every Windows 10 machine has it. Every Windows 7 machine has it. Every Windows server has it. And you can engage it and turn it on for free. You just have to kind of look up how to turn it on for you. Maybe it comes running by default, but you can turn it on and activate it. But basically, it looks at folders that it wants to give permission to the outside world. In this case, we created a folder called demo. And demo is empty right now, which means that if we were to go to this server from the outside world and look for demo, it wouldn't see anything. It would just give us an error because there's nothing here yet. What we're going to do is we're going to create a web-based project in Visual Studio, and we're going to publish it to this folder. And I'm going to show you how you can get to application from the outside. To give you a quick example of that, we'll just load up a browser here, and we will type in etictraining.nyit.edu/demo. Okay. So this is the folder that the world can see because it's a web server, and demo is the folder that we defaulted to this application. And when I go to it, we should get an error, right? There's nothing there. So we don't really get it. We get kind of a 404 error, can't find the page and some other stuff. And that's the idea, that we can't really see because there's nothing there yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to minimize this, and we are going to start our programming of the application, okay? And because we showed you that, there is a folder that stuff is stored upon, everything that we have in our web server. So if you just load up IIS in your search window on your computer, you'll be able to find Internet Information Services and load it. And that's what this program is. It's the web server of Microsoft that runs on Windows 7 machines, Windows 10 machines, Windows Server machines. And basically, once you have a web server configured and turned on, and if you right click, you'll see all these different things. You could stop it, you could start it, you could configure it. All of the folders that you show underneath here, these are aliases that we can see from the outside. We're giving permission to the outside world to see these, but they're linked to physical folders on your machine. So if you don't know how a web server works, there's physical folders on your machine, just like any other machine. And what you put in there, you're making available to the outside world through your web server, right? So your web server, you're configuring these aliases called whatever, And then when you go to the web server name / alias, it's showing you all the contents in that folder that you want the world to see, but it's not showing them anything else on their computer. So it's securing their other parts of their computer, but it's giving access purposely to the rest of the world, to those folders and the content in them, right? So anyway, that's how web servers in general work. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create an application that does something so that we can show you how to create it and make it available to the outside world. Okay, so the first thing a program does when a tier 3 program does is it creates these pages that it wants web servers to know about. There's some default pages that web servers usually see, index. One's called index, one's called default, one's called. So it always creates these so that the web server knows what to start first. In C#, there's in ASP.NET, there's something pretty unique about it, right? Whenever you see the default.aspx page, there's two other folders in design. There's two other pages that go along with each one of these pages. One is .cs, C#. It's just the code. So you have a web page, you have the code, and then you have a designer page, which holds all of your little kind of design configurations regarding CSS formats and stuff like that. Right? So there's 3 different pages. The purpose is when you go into industry and you want to be a web designer, that's one job. When you want to be a coder, that's another job. When you want to be a designer, that's the third job. Each one of these workers at an organization could work on the individual item without clobbering the other, right? And that's how C# and ASP.NET work, right? They allow different people to work on their specialties, and at the end, it's very easy to bring them all together. All right, so it's a very neat environment for development. Now, this is ASP.NET. It's an ASPX page, and it's active server script, active server page. It's basically a very smart, lively HTML page. It does everything HTML does, but it's thinking at the same time, and you can make it do things and attach to other objects and stuff like that in an object-oriented manner directly from the HTML page. Okay, so there's one way to look at it like this, in Visual Studio, and that's fine, but it doesn't really show you. So we go to the design page a lot, and we kind of look at what it looks like from a design page. And when you look at this page, it looks very much like we're creating a web page. And if we wanted to see it as a web page, what we could do is instead of compiling a program like we do in Java or C++, what we would do, or even in C#, it was a different type of application. But what we do in a web application is we do compile it, but we compile it into a series of files that a web browser can look at, all the HTML files, all the ASP files, and then there's a DLL, dynamic link library, that gets created that allows us to look at all the code we created, which we haven't done yet. But basically, when you click on this particular browser button here, it's going to load up a local version of Chrome in this case, and it's going to load up our project as it currently sees it. So it's a local web server, it's a local program, and it does behave fully like that program though. So if you click the home button, it takes you to home. If you click about, it takes you to about. Click contact, takes you to contact. And this is our default application we just created, all right? So what we can do is we can say, all right, let's close this out. And let's go back and let's start editing, this to make it a little more customized, right? And we say this is my interest demo app, and we're going to basically go to this. If you notice, when you go to web page and you're creating your program, you'll notice that, wow, that change happened. But you'll notice that as I click this little toolbar here, everything below it is changing, but that's staying the same. Well, that's your master page. All right. And what we do is we call it the site master. And when we open the site master has a bunch of stuff we could change so that it incorporates it into the design of the website, makes it work more like a local program. So what I can do is I can change my application name here so it shows up properly. So let's go to interest app. And then the tabs that are being controlled, what we can do is we can keep the ones that are there, but what we can do is we can add a new one, and we can call that one interest, the interest program. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we probably have an interest page. Let me see something on, I think we have an interest page with our, the interest lecture series, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link right here, and I'm going to go back to my I'm going to go back to my page right here, and I'm going to put in, that's the link. So now what'll happen is that if I go to my design page, I'm now seeing that my interest app changed. If I go to my default, I should see that up here. I should see the drop downs change. And when I launch this, we should see the actual aesthetic changes that we changed. My interest app demo, we changed this link right here. But we also start seeing additions. Now we're starting saying, oh, wow, there's my interest page. And now it links to the new page that's showing the interest sessions, okay? So we have this way of, in a very kind of easy graphical GUI type environment to control the design and look and feel of the application. So it makes it really easy for creating new applications and designing them. The cool thing about ASP.NET in Visual Studio is that as you want to create new kind of things inside your web page, they give you a toolbox, and that toolbox stays standard no matter what you build in Visual Studio. If you build a console app, if you build a web forms app, if you build a web-based app or a phone app, the toolbox is the same. So you get to learn and be familiar with all the tools they give you. And then once you learn them, you can pretty much apply them to anything. So it makes it very powerful, and it's an exponential learning curve for you. You can learn how to do all these different applications in one spot, in one way. So if you look, we could put in ad rotators, we could put in buttons and calendars and all kinds of little tools that we have to build a custom forms app for our application. What we're going to do is that what we haven't seen yet, we haven't really seen C# code. We've seen ASP.NET, we've seen AS active server page code, and that's very powerful. But that's all kind of visual in nature. Okay, what we want to do is we want to create code just like we would in Java and just like we would in C++, and we want to make it work just as powerfully. But we want to do it in a web format, right? We want to make changes on a local computer from a web-based, a web-hosted page. We want to do things locally and process complex mathematical calculations from the web and display them on a machine, right? So how do we do that? And that's what we're going to get into next. That's where C# comes in. And the one thing we're going to do is we're going to basically go to our toolbox, and we're going to drop in one of two things. We could drop in a button. We could drop in a button that does something and links us somewhere, or we could drop in what we call just a hyperlink. And the hyperlink will basically take us to another page. Now, if you look over here, every time we click on an object, we have our properties form that's filling out. So like this button, we could change the word of it to begin so that button now shows us kind of what it's meant to do. In the link page, in the link one, what we're going to do is we're going to call it interest calculator. And we're going to make that form actually calculate financial interest, monetary interest for us, just for fun, and a little bit of a pun on words. So we're going to call this the interest calculator. And we're also going to call this calc. We're going to call the control calc. So everything we do is going to be based on the control called calc. And when it loads that page, we don't want it to kind of replace the page we're looking at. So we're going to actually tell it to go into a blank page. In other words, don't leave the one we're on up, but when we link to the new one, go to the new one. Now we save that. What we can do is, if we don't want to load it right away, what we can do is we can go to build, and we can build the solution, and we'll see if it builds without bugs or without errors. Okay, so it says one succeeded, so I don't have any bugs yet, or how many issues or errors. And if I go to test that in a browser, okay, we see all of our changes so far, and we see our begin button. If I click it, nothing happens because we didn't code it to do anything. But if I hit my interest calculator button, oh, I know why. I know why. In the interest calculator button, we have to go to the navigate URL, and we have to tell it what page we want to go to. So we're going to create a page called calculator.aspx. And we use the tilde and the slash to make sure it knows to look in its local folder. The reason we do that is different browsers, Firefox and all that, don't know where to look unless you tell it. So we use the tilde slash to make sure that on every browser, no matter what phone, tablet, or device, and whatever browser, it's always going to work the same way. So we always use that piece to look for the page. And what we should see is when we come up into here, we should see the same behaviors where begin doesn't do anything because we didn't tell it what to do, but interest should take us to the calculator ASPX. Now, why do we get an error? Because we didn't create the new page yet. We didn't create it yet. So now our job is to create the calculator page. All right, so now what we're going to do is we have to create page called calculator.aspx that does something new. What is it going to do? It's going to collect interest information. It's going to perform a calculation for a simple interest rate. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to project. We're going to go to add new. We're going to go to one of two things. You can create a web form, which then just kind of pops up a new web form, but we want to create a web form that also shows that menu bar in it so we can kind of link it and make it look like the rest of the program. So we're going to create a web form with a master page. And we're going to create that web form. We're going to call it calculator.aspx, okay? Because that's what we linked it to in the other one. And once I click add, it's going to ask me, what do I want the master page to be? And I'm going to click site master because we know we edited that before and we were working in that, so we know what that is. So now we click OK, right? And now we have a page with the master page up there. And now it's just asking us, what do we want to do in the main context screen? So I usually give myself a little bit of room to play with in here. And I also like to work in something called panes. It's called panel, actually. Panes is from an older version of ASP. When we drop a panel in, the panel lets us work where every different control that we put into the panel, we can move the panel around at a later date, like without moving each individual control in each different text box or whatever. We can just move the whole panel. So if we don't like the position of the panel or where it is, we make a panel, we build everything inside the panel, and then we can move it. Think about like an egg carton. We have an egg carton with all the eggs. We don't have to move every egg every time. We just take the carton out. So I like to work in panels. It's just something I've built over the years in designing apps. And I also like, in this case, to center it so that as we're working, we kind of put everything in there, right? So what do we need for interest? We need to calculate a principal amount, okay? We need to calculate an interest rate. We need to calculate a time frame, right? Time / duration of the loan or of the account or whatever it might be. And we need ultimately a total, okay? And if we stop there and we kind of look at our application, we start to see like some functionality starting to happen where we kind of go to our home piece and we hit interest calculator. Now we're here, but it doesn't do anything. It's not capturing information. It's not processing information. It's certainly not displaying any information of use. It's just still website design type stuff. Now, if you're a web designer in ASP.NET, and you work for a company, this might be all you do. This might be all you do because that's your skill set. You design beautiful things that users love to use, but you don't really know the coding end of it. You're just like, look, here's the way it looks, and hey, Mr. Coder, hey, Mrs. Coder, here's what you need to program, right? And that's kind of how those jobs are separated. And that's why they're different files. So now what we're going to do is we are going to come into this particular section here, and we're going to start dropping in things called text boxes. And we're going to drop a text box here. We're going to drop a text box here. We're going to drop a text box here. And we're going to drop a text box here. And what we're going to do is we're going to name those text boxes, right? We want them to be appropriate for what we're going to put in them. So one is called the principal. We're going to call this I rate, okay, interest rate. Call this duration. Okay, and then we're going to call this total. And now what we're starting to see is that if we call these something, it makes them real. And we can actually start to think about what coding would be like if we wanted to do that. Now, if we wanted to make the total box equal to whatever the total interest is based on the principal and the interest rate and the time, then we have to kind of have some function to do that. We have to have something to click that makes it do it, right? After we make changes and stuff like that. So what we want to do is we want to pick and choose what we want to do. Now, we could put another button in. We could put another hyperlink in, but we have to use something called a link button. So it had some code behind it. But we could also use something called an image button too. And if we use an image button, that's cool because then we could take an image off the web. So we could put, somebody's face there and click total, right? So that makes it kind of interesting from a designer's perspective. So to make things easier for today, we're just going to do a button. And that button is going to be called calculate. So we will call it, for the text, we're going to call it, I'm sorry about that. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Okay. And when we calculate, we want it to perform our interest calculation on the principal, the interest rate, the time, and then populate the total. Okay. So when we click on calculate, it's still in this web form, right? It's still a button, an image, and it's an object for the web page. When we double click on it, it brings up our calculator ASPX.CS script. And now we're working in code. Now this is your C family of languages. Now it looks familiar to you as like C++ and C and Java, right? Now we start working in public classes, private classes, methods, functions, variables, right? Loops, conditionals. Now we're in the programming section. Now what does this mean? It means that we're in the best of all worlds. We have the web page design that can look all kinds of, fancy and attractive and super functional and organized, and be web-based so that anybody on any device can get it anywhere in the world. But now we have code behind, we call it code behind, that when you click an object in that web page, it's now actually processing any code that you would normally process on a local machine. It's processing behind the scenes on the server and still allowing the browser of whatever device to see the results, right? It's like the best of all worlds. So now we get to kind of process code on the server side and display it on the workstation, right? And that's what we're going to do now with the devices that we have. Let me just minimize this for a second here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to basically take some of the work that we've done kind of prior in prepping for this, and we're just going to kind of bring it here. Okay, so just to give you an idea of similar to the other coding that you've done, but in C#, if we did something like irate, right? Irate was an object that we created and we named irate. So what does irate mean? Irate means it sees it. It knows it as that object on the web page. So in the code, it sees it automatically. And if I do irate.text, that means that this value is going to equal to the text, whatever text we put into irate. So if we did something like double value dtest equals, right? And we're going to basically make it the double value of whatever text, whatever string text somebody types in. If they type in 1, 2, 3, 4, we can convert that to a double value. So we get, numbers with decimals. But since it's text, we have to convert it. So if we do something like converts dot to double, okay, and we place in the text, okay, boom, that's it. That's your C# code, similar to Java, but we're using the .NET framework. The .NET framework, just like you would use Java, and you would import in different libraries, different packages to do things, just like in C++, you would include different libraries to do things. It's the same thing with ASP.NET. We can use, we call it using, up here, using any of the ASP.NET framework. And the .NET framework allows you for all kinds of embedded integration tools to do data analytics and attach to multiple databases and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really powerful framework to use. So here we're just doing a basic kind of like setup here, but what I'm going to do, since we did this already for time purposes, I'm going to kind of just take a shortcut here. I'm going to remark this out, okay, and then I'm just going to kind of put in this particular shortcut here. So if you notice in our code, in our C# code, we're not using this interest formula here where we're doing principal times rate times time divided by 100. We're actually using the principals times 1 plus the rate times the time. That's the formula we're using here. So what you'll see is that we set a double variable equal to d, anything, because it's double, we use d rate. So it's dir rate, di rate. We convert it to a double. We create a variable called d duration. We convert it to a double. We create a variable called d principal, convert it to a double. It has to be converted to a double so that the system knows how to calculate it. It can't calculate text. If you try to add text fields together, it'll work, but it'll concatenate them. If you try to add 63 and 42, it's going to be 6342. It just concatenates them because it thinks it's text. So it'll work, but it doesn't do the real math. So you have to convert them to do the math. And what we do here is we set the d total field, the d total variable equal to the interest formula, right? So this formula right here is the actual interest formula that we used right here. And what we're doing is then we're taking that value, that D total value that we create, and we're setting it back to the text field called total. So we're going to read in all the variables that people type in string, okay? And then we're going to convert them to numeric and we're going to calculate. And then we're going to convert it back to string to populate the display in the total field, okay? And it looks like we're not getting any errors. We have to test it to find out, but what we can do is we could build a solution. One succeeded, we didn't get any failed. To give you an idea, if I did have an error, not only would that error find it in the components, but it would not compile until we fixed it. All right, so just so you know what it looks like when you have an error, it will find it when you're typing, just like your other IDEs, but also it will not compile and run without it. Okay, so now what happens is now we go into our full application. You'll notice that we have our main app. It still works just like normal. We have the about, contact, we have interest, the link still works. And now when we go to our interest calculator, it also works because now the page exists. Remember, it would crash before we did the page, and now it exists. And now it's looking for us to add in values into these particular fields. Okay, and then when we hit calculate, we're looking to see if it works, the coding to calculate the total. So let's do a simple one first, right? If I put in, to keep the math simple, $1,000, and I put in an interest rate of 0.07, and I put a duration of time, my total should be $1,070. Correct. All right. If I put in a value of $10,000 and I put in an interest rate of 12%, and I did it for 20 years, now I'm looking at $34,000, which seems a little low. That seems very low. Doesn't seem like it's doing it per year. So we might have a problem with the calculation, but that's okay. Let me see if I can do this at 5%. Yeah, it seems a little low. It might be missing something on the formula, but that's okay for the demo. But keep in mind what's happening here. What's happening here is that we are using a web form that we are looking at in just HTML. And we're collecting numeric data. We're collecting numeric data from these fields. But when we hit calculate, we're not in the web arena anymore. We're calculating things using C#, which is truly doing the calculations for my session. When I'm logged into this, I'm on a session on a web server. It knows who I am for that session. It's actually calculating the variables and the values only for me. And it's running that on a server and then just displaying the results to me. What this means is that you have an entire series of libraries. One is called System.io. And System.io allows you to interact with all the different input-output devices on a workstation who's connected to you as a server. So you could have a machine running from Farmingdale, New York, connecting to a server in Asia. And that server in Asia will actually know what that machine has and what it can do because the IO library is communicating with the server that way. Right? So it becomes extremely powerful when you want to work in a very positive, constructive way with users and local machines, saving to USB drives, things like that. You can do all that from a web-based script, which is incredible. It's incredible. Coming from years when I started early in technology, I won't even tell you how many years ago, this was science fiction. So it's really a wonderful ability to do all this now. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to explain kind of the process now. So now we have this wonderful kind of working interest calculator that we want to open up to the world, and we want people to be able to use it and to kind of see this concept. What we want to do is we want to publish this to a website. Now remember, our web server had a folder on it that we identified as iNet pub, www.root, and demo. Demo is empty. So when somebody goes to demo, they don't see anything. It's not there. So what we have to do is we have to go back to our Solution Explorer. We have to go to our web application right here, and we have to say, all right, we want to right-click. We want to publish it. And when we publish it, we set up the publishing to go to a web server, to an Azure account, or somewhere else. but I selected to publish to the folder. I know I'm on the machine that we're working on for the server, so I know where to publish it. So I'm basically going to go to the folder. I'm going to browse. I'm going to go to my iNet pub folder, my www root folder, my demo folder. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create the profile so it knows where I'm going. And then once I create the profile, I can just publish this the same way. I don't have to do that ever again. It's just one time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish my whole project, not every file, just the compiled files. The project will stay in its source code. But when I publish it, it creates compiled versions of everything and then uploads them. And you'll see one succeeded. Now, what we should see is that in that folder now, in the www root in the demo folder, we see everything that our program needs to run. So all the ASPX pages, if you look in the bin folder, you'll see a bunch of DLLs, dynamic link libraries, that get created. So anything that we needed from our program that got created. Now, normally we would have a jar file for Java. We would have an exe file, a single file for any other type of program, and that's what would run. But in this case, we see it's a three-tier application, so it has to run on a server. So we see a whole bunch of individual files that it needs to run. That's how web servers run. Web servers have all the local files running. So now what we're going to do is we're going to basically do the last step here, and we're going to go back to our eTIC training NYIT.edu/demo, and we're going to refresh, and we should see it working. And then let's see. There you go. So we created a web application in a development environment that we now just made available to 20 billion users. That's it. And basically, if I was at home if I was on my phone right now, if you went to this website right now, whatever you did, you would get the same exact links that I'm getting. You would be able to go to the program that we just created. You'd be able to go to all the different links, and then you'd be able to go to the interest calculator and do the same thing. Now, this is no longer, I'm going to use 8%. I think I used 0.08. I'm going to try to 8% to see if that works. And I'm going to try 2 years. And then we're going to try to calculate $17,000 at 8%. That doesn't seem to be working correct either, but that's okay. It might. It might be compounding interest. So the idea is that we are able to create code in a web-based format, publish it. But now if I found a bug and I fix this bug in the interest calculation and I republish that, I don't have to update 20 billion devices. That's the beauty of it. I update it once, I fix it, I patch it, I test it, I publish it, and then that's it. Everyone has it. It is the absolute utmost best way to do things. And it's really kind of from a career perspective, it's what industry is looking for you today to think like, the best way to do this is create a local console app. The best way to do this is create a local Windows app. The best way to do this is create a phone app. The best way to do this is create a web-based app. They want you to know the difference of when you would choose what type of app to create, and also to be able to create all of these things. Now, we didn't do any kind of database connection here, which we do. We upgrade this version of Interest. We move into SQL Server. We develop SQL Server databases, but we do also demonstrate how to attach your web app to the SQL Server database. Now, that's a much different topic, but again, that's what they call full stack developers. When you see an ad for a full stack developer, they want somebody who could do what we just did and more, and also develop the database and also make the two of them talk to each other. That's what everybody's looking for, a full stack developer today. Kind of a bit of a unicorn to some degree, because it's hard to get somebody who really understands all of them really well. But on the same note, that's what really is the ultimate goal. So the more you know about programs like Visual Studio, programs like Internet Information Services, IIS, programs, languages like C#, all these different tools that you have are available to you from a career perspective. That is what we're going to kind of finalize with today. You saw the creation of a new project. You saw the creation of a new website, the creation of a new applet, a new kind of C# coded applet on how it actually works and how what it can do. And you also saw the publication of that to a public web service that we have access to from really anywhere in the world. So you have all this stuff, you've seen it, and you also know that all the tools we built today, as a reminder, they're all free. So take advantage of it, download them, play with them, get used to them. And I think as your skill sets build, you'll start seeing a lot of opportunities for you as far as career goes. All right. So with that, I am going to thank you for attending the interest session. I'm going to stop the video now and answer a few questions. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you see you on our next video.